You're standing in an optician shop. The light is warm and low, the way it always is in these places. The kind of light that makes everything on the shelf look like it's worth the money. Glass cases along the walls, frames laid out in rows like jewelry. You pick up a pair. Black, clean, a small logo on the arm. You turn them over in your hands. The hinges feel solid, the lenses dark and perfect. And then you find the little tag, and it says $249. You wince, but only a little, because they're good glasses, and that's what good glasses cost. You've believed that your entire life. Everyone you know believes it. It's one of those prices that stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like a law of nature. The sky is blue, water is wet, glasses cost a few $100s. Here's the part nobody tells you at the counter. That frame in your hand cost around $8 to make. The lenses, the frame, the hinges, the little logo on the side, all of it. About the price of a sandwich. And you don't have to take my word for it. Take it from the man who built the biggest eyeglass chain in America. The person who, more than anyone alive, taught this country how to buy glasses. In his 70s now, he says it plainly. You can get first-quality lenses for $1.25 a piece. It's a complete ripoff. $1.25. And here is the detail that ties the whole story together, the one most people find hardest to believe. That same frame, from that same factory, can end up in two different pairs. One sells online for $22. The other, the one in your hand, sells for $249. Same lens, same factory, maybe the same worker, on the same line, on the same afternoon. The factory doesn't care whose name goes on the arm. It just makes glasses, by the millions, for whoever places the order. So what are you actually paying for? Not the glass, not the plastic. You're paying $240 for a logo, for a room with beautiful lighting, and for something you have never once been asked to notice. A toll. Because between that $8 factory and your face, there is a road. And one company has spent 60 years quietly buying up every single inch of it. It makes the glasses, it owns the shops that sell them, it runs the insurance plan that decides how much of them you pay for. And this is the one that stops people cold. It owns the rival brands you thought were competing for your money. The names on the shelf that look like a healthy free market? Walk from one store to the next, hand your card to what feels like a completely separate business, and the money can land in the same account, in the same country, on the same balance sheet. One company. One. Its name is EssilorLuxottica. It sells close to $30 billion of eyewear every year, and more than 2 billion people on this planet can't see clearly without help, which means this single company sits between a great many of them and the plainest human thing there is: the ability to see. Now, there are three things about all this that you were never told. The first is that it was built by a man who began with absolutely nothing, an orphan from Milan who grew up in a home for abandoned children. The second is that a Chinese city most people on Earth have never heard of is right now, quietly, tearing the whole thing open. And the third is that inside the family that owns it all, there is a war happening as we speak over tens of billions of dollars. To understand a wall between $8 and $300, you have to understand the man who built it. And to understand him, you have to go back to a city climbing out of a war and a boy that nobody came to collect. Milan, 1935. A boy is born into a family that has almost nothing. His father, a street vendor who sold vegetables from a cart with roots down south, is already dead. He died before the boy arrived. And in a small, sad gesture, the mother names the child after the husband she has just lost, Leonardo. She has other children. She's raising them alone, in a country that's poor and about to be at war, and she cannot feed them all. So she does the hardest thing a mother in that city could do. She takes her youngest to an orphanage, the Martinite, an old Milanese institution for the sons of families who simply couldn't cope. and she leaves him there. And that is where he grows up. Years later, a rich and powerful man, he'll say only one thing about those years. The only memory I have is the sadness of that place. Up at 6, lined up, bare-chested for inspection, even in January. Nobody adopts him. Nobody knows the right people, because there are no right people. In the end, it's said, his mother couldn't bear his unhappiness and took him home. At 14, he goes to work, apprenticed to a man who engraves metal, who makes the dies and molds that stamp trophies and medals. In the evenings, exhausted, he studies drawing at an art school, and it turns out he's good with his hands. Very good. He learns the one skill that will one day make him one of the richest men alive, though he has no idea yet. How to build a mold so precise that 1,000 pieces fall out of it identical, every single time. His name is Leonardo Del Vecchio. At 23, he opens a tiny workshop of his own. He calls it, with a kind of dark humor, the Hole. He works there through the night while keeping a day job at a factory because the steady wage is the only collateral a bank will accept. There's a story they still tell up in those mountains. A workman, waking in the black hours before dawn, would open his shutters, look across the river, see a single light already burning in the shed, and say to his brother, "The boss is already at the shop." He worked, they say, 20 hours a day. And then a harder scene, one that tells you who he was. When the partners who backstopped his loans threaten to pull out, he gathers his workers and, with tears in his eyes, admits that he's afraid he can't make payroll this month. But in the same breath, he refuses to fold. Anyone who wants to leave, he says, can leave. He's carrying on alone. And not one of them walks. He goes and squeezes an advance payment out of his next customer, and the wages get paid. In 1961, in Agordo, a village high in the Dolomites, surrounded by rock and pasture and not much else, he sets up for real. And here's the thing that matters. He does not make glasses. He makes parts. Little metal components, hinges, the arms, the tiny pads that rest on your nose. And he sells them to the companies that do make glasses. He is, at this moment, the smallest link in someone else's chain. But he notices the thing that will define the rest of his life. The margins on these scraps of metal aren't good. They're absurd. A few cents of steel sold for many times that, over and over, forever. Because everyone's eyes fail eventually, and nobody ever stops to ask what a pair of glasses actually cost to make. So he climbs. He stops making just the parts and makes the whole frame. He stops making frames for other people and puts his own name on them. He keeps a tape recorder by his bed so that when an idea shakes him awake at 3 in the morning, he can capture it and fall back asleep. His rule, in his own words, was only ever one thing: to become the best. His rivals had a name for him. They called him the Hawk, circling high, patient, and then, all at once, the strike. His whole philosophy sat on a single fear: whatever you don't take, someone else will. And in 1988, he makes the move that changes the entire industry. He walks into the world of high fashion, and he persuades Giorgio Armani to lend his name to a line of eyeglasses. It sounds small. It was the hinge the whole century turned on. Before it, glasses were a medical device, a slightly shameful thing you wore because your eyes had failed. After it, glasses were an accessory, a label, a thing you wanted, with a designer's name on the arm and a designer's price to match. Armani was first. Then the floodgates opened. Chanel, Prada, Versace, one great house after another, each of them stamping its name on a frame this one Italian company built. 2 years after that, he takes his company public. Not in Milan, but in New York, on the biggest market in the world, before he'll even list back home. If you have to sail, he liked to say, you choose the wide sea. But under the deals and the designers and the mountain of money, there was always the same boy. The one who'd had no control over anything. Not his father, not his home, not a single door. And somewhere in that orphanage, he had made himself a promise that as long as he lived, he would never feel powerless again. Never. Hold on to that promise, because decades from now, it will explain the strangest thing this man ever did. Reaching out from beyond the grave to take his own children by the throat. For a wall to work, one company has to own every brick in it. And through the 1990s, Del Vecchio went out and bought them, one at a time. The buying is where you finally see how the machine worked, and the ugliest chapter is right in the middle of it. Start in 1995. He goes after an American giant called US Shoe, a company more than 100 years old, several times the size of his own. It's a hostile takeover, about $1.5 billion, and to everyone watching, it looks insane. A little Italian frame maker trying to swallow a corporation many times bigger. But he doesn't want the shoes. He doesn't want the clothing. He wants one thing buried deep inside that giant, a chain of eyewear stores called LensCrafters. So he takes the whole company, sells the shoe business off to somebody else, sheds the rest, and keeps the shops. And now he's crossed a line that changes everything. He doesn't just make the glasses anymore. He owns the shelf they sit on. He owns the very chair you sit in for your eye exam. 1999, he buys Ray-Ban for $640 million. Now, Ray-Ban was a legend. It was born decades earlier when a high-altitude Army pilot, sick from the glare, begged for lenses that could ban the rays. Generals wore it. It was pure American myth. But by the 90s, under other owners, the myth had been run into the ground. Flimsy frames, $19 a pair, spinning on a rack between the beef jerky and the lottery tickets at the gas station. The analysts tell Del Vecchio he's overpaying for a corpse. He doesn't care. And here's how he decided the price. He sat down with a single sheet of paper and did 3 sums: how many they sell, what each one costs to make, what he could charge, and landed on a number nearly double what anyone else had offered. Then he pulled Ray-Ban out of the gas stations overnight. He raised the price. He put it in his own shops and marketed it as luxury. The lens never changed. The frame barely changed. The only thing that changed was who owned the name and what they decided it was worth. Then he goes after the shelves themselves. He buys Sunglass Hut, the largest sunglasses chain on the planet. And here is where the story turns cold, because it finally comes with a face. There was a man named Jim Gennard. He'd started a company called Oakley with $300 out of the trunk of his Honda, selling motorcycle grips at the racetrack. He named it after his dog. He was a recluse and an obsessive, almost no interviews, almost no photos, and he'd built Oakley into a cult, worn by every athlete on Earth, fiercely independent, and selling a huge share of its sunglasses through Sunglass Hut, the shop that Del Vecchio now owned. So Del Vecchio demanded lower prices. Gennard flew to Milan to fight it out in person, and the contrast in that room says everything. Gennard in a sport shirt, slacks, and his own Oakley shoes. Del Vecchio in a tailored suit. And when Gennard, trying to end a long and bruising fight, said he hoped that one day they might become good friends, Del Vecchio looked at him and said, flatly, without any heat at all, "We will never be friends." Then he made good on it. He cut Oakley's orders down to a fraction. He took Oakley off the shelf. And on a single day in August 2001, Oakley's stock lost a third of its value, the worst day in its history. Not because the product got worse, not because anyone stopped wanting it, because one company controlled the shelf and decided to turn off the tap. Jannard, defiant, put out a statement calling it their loss. But a healthy company was suddenly bleeding, and everyone could see it. And then, 6 years later, the brand still weakened, Luxottica simply bought Oakley. Just over $2 billion. Read that back slowly. The company that owned the store starved the brand, watched its value collapse, and then bought it at a discount. The recluse who'd built Oakley from a garage watched his life's work get absorbed into the exact machine he'd been fighting. His line about the sale is almost unbearably graceful. Oakley is my business daughter. After 32 years, she met and married an Italian boy. And then he did the only thing a true inventor can do against a monopoly. He refused to play the same game twice. He walked away and built a movie camera, a machine that upended Hollywood. If you can't beat the man who owns the road, you go build a different road. Now, the quiet acquisition, the piece almost everyone misses. A few years earlier, Del Vecchio had bought another American company, and it came with something that wasn't a factory and wasn't a brand. It was an insurance plan, a vision benefit, the thing that tells you how much of your glasses you'll actually have to pay for. Sit with what that means. The same company now makes your lenses, owns the brand on the frame, owns the shop you walk into, and runs the insurance that decides your price. And then, the last brick. In 2018, Luxottica merges with a French company called Essilor, the largest maker of lenses in the world, the people who'd invented the modern progressive lens. The frames were always Italian. Now, the glass inside them was family too. So stand back and look at the whole machine at once. The factory that grinds the lens, the brand on the arm, the shop where you buy it, the insurance that pays for it. One owner, from the raw metal all the way to the money in your wallet. Everything. Everything. And it would be a clean, simple story of greed if it weren't about to introduce us to the people it ran over on the way up. Every monopoly has an official story, and it's almost always told by the winner. So let's hear this one from the people it ran over, because they're not who you'd expect them to be. The most damning witnesses here aren't the customers. They're the men who built the thing. Start with the mall. If you've ever bought a pair of glasses in about an hour, under bright, cheerful light, in a shop between the food court and the shoe store, that was one man's idea. His name is E. Dean Butler, and in the 1980s, he founded LensCrafters. He didn't just open a store, he invented the way an entire country buys glasses. He made a fortune doing it. And now, in his 70s, retired to the English countryside, he has quietly become the most dangerous witness against the industry he created, because he knows, to the penny, what the numbers really are. You can get amazingly good frames, he says, Warby Parker quality for $4 to $8, and absolutely first-quality lenses for $1.25 apiece. A $300 pair, in other words, might hold $20 of real glass and plastic. So what does the man who built the store call the price you pay for it? I know, it's ridiculous. It's a complete ripoff. And then, the sentence that should stop you cold from the architect himself. If that's not a monopoly, I don't know what is. Then there's Charles Dehaan, an engineer in his 70s who for years ran a company that made frames, one of LensCrafters' most important suppliers. They called him, he says, their crown jewel. His frames cost about $10 to $16 to make, the lenses around $5. And then, one day, the crown jewel wasn't needed anymore. Now listen to how he describes the business he gave his life to. There is no competition in the industry, not anymore. Luxottica bought everyone. They set whatever prices they please. And on the officials who were supposed to be watching, the ones who waved merger after merger through, decade after decade, they fell asleep at the wheel. They should never have allowed all these companies to roll into one. This is the part the 20-minute version leaves out entirely: the bodies on the ground. Because when one company owns the factory, the brands, and the shops, the people it crushes aren't lines on a chart. They're the independent optician on your high street, the one who has to stock the giant's brands just to keep the lights on, at the prices the giant sets, often forbidden from discounting them, while a bright company-owned chain opens 2 doors down. They're the small maker who loses the shelf, and with it, the business. They're the crown jewel, cut loose the moment the machine could stamp his part for itself. And then there's the trap you never even see, because it arrives dressed as a gift: your insurance. Follow the money through it, one careful step at a time, because this is the cleverest part of the whole design. In America, the largest eyewear company owns one of the 2 big vision plans outright, and the other giant insurer, in turn, owns an eyewear maker of its own. Read that twice. The company selling you the glasses also runs the plan that tells you how much they cost. Now watch how gently it walks you around the room. Say you want a specific designer frame, a Michael Kors. At a Walmart, it runs about $72. At LensCrafters, which the eyewear giant owns, the exact same frame is $144. Twice the price for the identical object. But here's the hook. Your benefit, that little discount your plan gives you, mostly only works inside their network, at their shops. So look at the choice they've quietly built for you. You could buy a $15 pair online and pay all $15 yourself. Or you could use your benefit, buy the expensive pair in their store, and stroll out feeling like you saved money. And if you dare to claim that cheap online pair as out-of-network, you'll open an account, upload documents, and wait 3 weeks for a fraction of it back. In-network, there's no paperwork at all. So quietly, rationally, you stay inside. The benefit was never a gift. It's a leash, and it walks you gently and politely right back to the shop that owns it. One last number, so the whole machine clicks into place. That designer name on the arm, the Chanel, the Prada, the Armani, what's it actually worth? The fashion house that owns the name typically takes somewhere between 5 and 14% of the sale, plus a slice for marketing. And it never touches the factory, never grinds a lens, never turns a single screw. The frame underneath still costs about $20 to make. It sells for $400 or $500. And here's the strangest twist of all. Those glamorous licensed brands actually earn the giant less than its own do, because it has to split the take with the designer, which tells you exactly what you're buying. Not the glasses, not even really the fashion house. You're paying a toll to the one company sitting quietly underneath all of it, and then a second, smaller toll on top for the privilege of a word on the arm. So the wall is high, and it's cruel, and it's owned from one end all the way to the other. Who on earth could possibly break it? The answer is a city you've almost certainly never heard of. Fewer than 1 million people in eastern China. Its name is Danyang. And Danyang makes half the eyeglass lenses on the planet. Sit with that for a second. Of every 2 people alive who are wearing glasses right now, reading a screen, driving a car, watching a kid's football match, one of them is looking through a lens that came out of this single city. It didn't start grand. 60 years ago, Danyang was a scatter of rough workshops, farmers grinding lenses by hand on stone, with the crudest tools you can picture. But it grew, and it kept growing. And today it turns out more than 400 million pairs of lenses a year. Walk into the market at its heart, and it's the size of a small town. 1,000 stalls under one roof, buyers flown in from every continent, wholesalers calling out numbers, prices pulled straight off the factory floor. And that market is the whole trick, because it cuts out the middle. In the old world, a pair of glasses passed from a factory to a brand to a distributor to a shop, and every hand it touched took a cut. Danyang lets you skip all of it. No brand, no middleman, no flattering light. You want a finished pair of prescription glasses? A few dollars, shipped to your door. And the people breaking the wall are real, and they have names. There's an engineer in Danyang named Zhang Chunlong. For years, the machine that puts the high-tech coating on a lens, the expensive, delicate step, could only be bought from Germany or Japan for 3 to 6 million yuan apiece. That one machine was the last real grip the old world had on this industry. So around 2014, Zhang built his own, Chinese-made, for closer to $1 million, a third of the price. And that's the deeper thing happening in that city. It didn't just learn to grind glass cheaply, it learned to build the machines that make the glass. The place that used to take the orders is starting to set the terms. And the disruptors in the West are quieter than the headlines make them sound. There's Zenny, started in a California garage in 2003 by a physicist named Tibor Laze and his wife, with no outside money at all. He was a man who loved to talk about cosmology, about how the universe began, and he had a simple, almost rude idea. Sell people glasses for what glasses actually cost, $7 a pair. Disruption, he liked to say, is inevitable. You can't stop it. They've now sold tens of millions of pairs. And where is Zenny's factory? It's in Danyang. The scrappy American disruptor and the giant Chinese lens city aren't two sides of a war, they're the same place. And then there's the famous one, Warby Parker. Born when one of its 4 founders, Dave Gilboa, lost his glasses on a trip and was quoted $700 to replace them. The first iPhone had just come out, he'd point out later. He could buy a computer for his pocket, but a new pair of glasses cost him more than that? One of his partners, Neil Blumenthal, had worked at a non-profit that handed out glasses to the poor, and he'd seen the secret with his own eyes. The very same factories make the cheap pairs for people living on a few dollars a day and the designer pairs for the rich. The markup was never the materials. It never had been. So this, right here, is the part of the story where the little guy finally wins. Cheaper glass out of a Chinese city. Clever founders out of a garage. An empire that overcharged the whole world for 60 years, cracking open at last. Hold that feeling. Hold it. But before you celebrate, turn around and look at what all this cheap glass actually reveals. Because here's the thing those $7 glasses show you the moment you stop looking at your own receipt. More than 2 billion people on this planet still cannot see clearly. And in the poorest countries on Earth, 2 out of every 3 who need glasses simply don't have them. Not because glasses are hard to make, Danyang just proved they cost a few dollars, but because of everything the world stacked on top of them. A few years ago, researchers ran a study in the tea gardens of Assam in the green hills of northern India. They found workers whose eyes had begun to fail, pickers in their 50s who could no longer quite see the youngest, most tender leaves, and they gave them a plain pair of reading glasses. That's all, just the glasses. And the result was the single largest jump in productivity ever recorded from any health measure anywhere on Earth. The older pickers gathered nearly a third more tea. A few dollars of glass, a completely different life. That is what a toll on eyesight really costs once you tally it across a whole planet. It isn't just the $200 you overpaid at a counter in a shopping mall. It's the billion human beings who never got to see clearly at all, quietly priced out of the plainest, oldest human thing there is. Here's the thing about the wall. It was never made of glass. Look back at everything you've seen. The frame was always cheap, a few dollars, out of Danyang or anywhere else. Anyone can make a frame. So if the money was never really in the frame, then breaking the frame doesn't break the empire. And it doesn't. The money was somewhere else the entire time, in 3 places the cheap glasses simply cannot reach. The first is the name, the logo on the arm, the small jolt of status that a $7 pair can never give you. China can copy the product perfectly. It cannot copy the aura, and the aura was the thing for sale. The second is the insurance, the quiet leash you just watched, walking you back to their shops no matter how cheap the alternative gets. And the third is the simplest of all. When a rebel finally grows big enough to matter, the empire just buys it. Several of those brave little websites that were going to set us free, they're inside the empire now, flying a pirate flag over what is quietly a company store. Now, this is the point where an easy film would bang the table and call it a crime. But the truth is stranger, and you deserve it straight. Angry customers took EssilorLuxottica to court in America, accusing it of running an illegal monopoly. And in 2025, a federal judge threw the cases out. Her words are worth hearing exactly. It is not illegal for a business to be enormous and enormously successful, so long as it does not engage in anti-competitive conduct. And, uncomfortable as it is, she has a point worth sitting with. This company holds maybe a quarter of the world's eyewear, which means 3/4 of it belongs to somebody else. There are hundreds of thousands of eyeglass shops on Earth, and the giant owns only a slice of them. This is not a monopoly the way one railroad owning every track is a monopoly. The frightening part isn't that the company broke the law, it's that it built all of this. The factory, the brands, the shops, the insurance, the toll, completely legally, in plain sight, and no one could stop it. But before you file the regulators under reasonable people who looked carefully, here is the twist that should genuinely keep you up at night. When these two companies merged, the watchdogs in Europe and America studied it hard, for months. And the one specific danger they examined and dismissed was this: that the combined giant would use its shops to force opticians into buying its lenses, squeezing the independents through the one channel it controlled. The regulators concluded that wouldn't happen. Case closed, no conditions. And then, a few years later, in Turkey, the competition authority caught the company doing very nearly that exact thing, handing opticians expensive lens-cutting machines cheap or free in exchange for a promise to buy its lenses, locking them in. The behavior the regulators had waved away as unlikely happened, on the ground, to real shops. So here is where we've actually landed, and it is not where you thought you were going when you picked up that $200 frame. China broke the factory. It did not break the toll, because it was never about the frames. It was the toll, the brand, the shop, the insurance, the road that one company owns from one end all the way to the other. And that gives you a way of seeing the world that works far, far beyond a pair of glasses. If you ever want to know who truly holds the power in any business, don't follow the product. Follow the toll. There is just one problem left standing between this empire and forever. The man who built the whole thing is gone. And it turns out the wall he built to keep the whole world out, he also built to trap the people locked inside it. In June of 2022, Leonardo Del Vecchio died, 87 years old. The Orphan from Milan, by then the second richest man in Italy, gone. And he left behind one of the strangest inheritances you will ever hear about. It wasn't just the eyewear empire. Through a private holding company tucked away in Luxembourg, he controlled his slice of EssilorLuxottica. But that was only the beginning. That same holding also owned enormous stakes in some of Italy's biggest banks, pieces of the country's whole financial system. This was a man whose reach ran far, far past the glasses on your face. And when he died, all of it was split into equal eighths among his heirs. But remember the boy who swore he'd never lose control of anything ever again? He didn't trust anyone to hold it after him, not even his own children. So years before he died, he wrote a rule into the family holding. Almost every major decision would require near total agreement among the heirs, somewhere close to 90% in favor. He built it deliberately so that no single child could ever seize the wheel and steer the empire somewhere he wouldn't have wanted it to go. He was, in the end, still cutting molds, one last one, to stamp his own family into the shape he'd chosen for them. Except math doesn't care what a father intended. There are 8 heirs, each one holds an eighth. And if a decision needs nearly 90% to pass, then a single heir holding just 1/8 can block all of it. Do the arithmetic. 7/8 is under 90%, so one share, and the whole machine grinds to a halt. And for about 3 years after the founder's death, it did. The family froze. The widow he had married, divorced, and married again. The children of the first marriage, the children of the last. Rival camps, deadlocked, over a company worth more than 100 billion euros. One heir able to hold the entire empire hostage with a single stake, not by breaking any rule, but by using the exact power the father had personally built and handed down. And the feud got personal, in the way these things always do, over money and trust. The founder, at the end, had trusted the machine to an outsider, a loyal lieutenant, not one of his blood, whom he'd handpicked to run it all. He'd even left the man a fortune in company shares. But a fortune in shares comes with a tax bill, and when the bill arrived, some of the children refused to help cover the cost of a gift they'd never wanted to give. Sons turned on the lieutenant. The widow and the children lined up on opposite sides of a boardroom. This was no longer about eyewear. It was a family at war over the estate of a man who had spent his whole life making sure no one could ever take what was his. Then, in 2026, one of the sons made his move. Leonardo Maria, named, remember, for his father, set out to buy 2 of his siblings out entirely. Something like 10 billion euros to take their shares, lifting his own to more than a third, and making himself the single largest owner of the whole thing. And standing across from him, the lieutenant, the executor the father chose. On one side, the man the old man trusted. On the other, the son who carries his name. As of right now, there's a truce, but it's been reported as provisional. The lawsuits pulled back, the deal still being finished, the ink not quite dry. And notice, in all of it, what the fight is actually over. Not how to make a better pair of glasses, who gets to stand at the toll booth. Now, I've spent a long time showing you the wall, so let me be fair about what's inside it. Because a story that only ever prosecutes is a story you cannot trust. This company also does things that a garage in California cannot. Take children's eyesight. Nearsightedness is spreading through the world's kids like a slow tide. More screens, less daylight. And this company's scientists built a lens that can measurably slow it down. In one trial, it cut the progression of a child's myopia by more than 70%, and regulators cleared it. That is a genuine medical good, and a $7 online pair simply cannot offer it. And go back to that mountain town, Agordo, where the Orphan built his first factory. Thousands of families up there still make their living from it, and tens of thousands of the company's own workers own a piece of it as shareholders. The company pours money back into the valley. A nursery kept open late for working parents, care for the elderly with dementia, health screenings, all of it open to the whole town, not just to staff. And the rebels aren't saints either. Warby Parker is no discount store. It charges healthy retailer margins of its own, and it has quietly become the very kind of branded chain it once set out to slay. And buying complex lenses online really can go wrong. A couple of millimeters off, and the whole world blurs. So the honest picture isn't a cartoon villain twirling his mustache. It's something harder to hold, and truer. A legal machine built by a real and driven and haunted man that delivers real things the world needs and quietly owns the road they all have to travel on. So the empire stands, beaten at the factory by China, fought over on the inside by the family, and still, somehow, standing. But there's a new war now, on a front the Orphan never saw coming, and it's the one that finally frightens the market. The next pair of glasses isn't just glass anymore, it's a computer. A camera above your eye, a speaker in each arm, a voice in your ear, an assistant riding on your face. And to fight that war, the eyewear giant did something telling. It took on a partner far bigger than itself. The American tech company Meta paid $3.5 billion for a small slice of the business. And together, in a single year, they sold something like 7 million smart glasses. It became the fastest-growing product the company had ever had, driving more than a third of its entire growth. So here's the riddle that should stop you. In that exact same stretch, the company's own stock fell by nearly half, tens of billions of dollars, simply gone. Why would the market punish its fastest-growing hit? Because the market looked at that shiny future, and it saw a trap. When your glasses become a computer, the value moves to whoever makes the computer, the software, the chips, the operating system. And the real titans are now lining up to walk onto this field. Google, Samsung, Apple. And the fear is exquisite, almost poetic, that the empire which spent 60 years clawing its way up to own the brand, the shop, and the toll gets shoved right back down into being exactly what it started as. A maker of components, a supplier, a frame wrapped around somebody else's screen. It is the precise fate Del Vecchio once inflicted on Oakley. The shelf turned against you, the value quietly drained away. 40 years later, it's circling back for the ones who dealt it. So, your next pair of glasses. You're back at the counter, under that same warm and flattering light, holding the same kind of frame. $300. But you see it differently now, don't you? You can see the toll booth standing quietly behind the price tag. And here's the thing worth keeping, long after you've forgotten every name in this story. Cheaper glasses were never going to be enough. A $7 pair doesn't tear the wall down, because the wall was never the price of the glasses. It was the ownership of the road between the factory and your face. And you do not break a road you don't own by building a cheaper car to drive on it. Once you can see that, you start seeing it everywhere. The supermarket shelf and who decides what's allowed to sit on it. The pharmacy and who quietly sets what your medicine really costs. The app on your phone and who takes a cut of every single dollar that moves through it. In almost any grown-up business, the money is rarely in making the thing. It's in owning the toll between the thing and you. So the next time a price makes no sense at all, don't ask what it costs to make. Ask who owns the road. The orphan's wall is still standing. He's gone. His children are at war over it. A city in China is selling the same glass for the price of lunch, and still, it stands. The real question was never why glasses cost so much. The real question, the one you can carry out of that shop and into the rest of your life, is who's standing at the toll booth now. and what it would truly take to tear it down. That's a story for another day, and as it happens, we've got a few of them.